Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Squadron, the president of Our Energy Policy, and welcome to our webinar today. And I hope all of you out there have been safe, healthy, stayed well through this period, and we wish you the best, and we really appreciate your taking the time to join us today. We have a really fascinating and crucial topic. I mean, one that really gets to the heart of so much of what we as a sector, the energy world, have been focused on, which is how do we balance and achieve decarbonization while simultaneously assuring a reliable grid and power system. And we've got several phenomenal guests to discuss this. Paula Gold-Williams from CPS Energy, Gil Quiniones from the New York Power Authority. They will have a conversation with Melanie Kenderdine about this critical topic, and we're really grateful to them for taking the time to be with us today. Just a couple of quick things. We will, about 40 minutes into the hour, take questions from all of you in the audience. If you do have questions, along the right bar of your screen, there's a questions tab. You can type in your question and submit it, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can throughout the hour. I also want to thank our partners and supporters, BP, Bracewell, Broadscale, API, Con Edison, National Grid, Schiff Harden, US Grid. We're very grateful for their support. And then the last thing I'd like to mention, I'll mention it again at the end. We will actually be effectively continuing the discussion that Paula, Gil, and Melanie will have today online on the Our Energy Policy website next week, so that all of you will have the chance to weigh in with your thoughts on what you're hearing today, as well as potentially ask other questions. So we encourage all of you to register and participate if you haven't already in our online discussions, and particularly next week in the one that will be the continuation of what we do today. So thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Melanie Kenderdine, the principal of the Energy Futures Initiative, former counselor to the Secretary of Energy in the Obama administration. And Melanie, I'm going to turn this over to you, and we'll see you at the top of the hour.
Great, and thank you so much, Bill, and thanks to Our Energy Policy for hosting this very important event and for the essential service that OEP provides. I've been associated with OEP since its inception. And I think its role in supporting unbiased information on critical energy issues of our day is really, really important. I hope everyone is safe and well in these difficult times. And I'd like to say, before I introduce our incredible panelists, I would like to ask two questions. How many people on this Zoom call are actually wearing their pajama bottoms? I am, okay. And I would also like to know how many women have actually combed the back of their hair. I am trying to find humor in a very difficult situation that we all find ourselves in. We have become Zoom meeting experts because we are in the middle of this pandemic. And my prayers go out to the families who've lost loved ones and whose loved ones have been ill with COVID-19. I would say I've been in New Mexico for 7 months. I work in Washington, D.C. I haven't been home this long since college. My mother is in assisted living and I can't see her. I haven't gone this long without seeing my mother in my entire life either. So I know we are all dealing with difficult circumstances. And again, my thoughts and prayers to everyone who have been affected by this crisis. Let me turn now. We have two outstanding panelists with us today. We're going to talk about decarbonization and reliable power. First is Paula Gold-Williams. Both of the panelists are friends of mine, and so I'm excited about talking to them. Paula is the president and CEO of CPS Energy. CPS is the nation's largest municipal utility that serves both electricity and gas customers in the San Antonio, Texas region. Paula has more than 30 years of leadership experience in San Antonio. She's been with CPS for 16 years, where her career has progressed from its controller to VP, Chief Administrative Officer, and then to CEO. Paula serves on many boards, was the past chair of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, and was awarded the inaugural Chief Trailblazer of the Year by S&P Global Platts for her commitment to her customers and her community. We also have Gil Quiniones with us today. Since 2011, Gil has served as the president and CEO of the New York Power Authority, the nation's largest state-owned electric utility. So we have public utilities very well represented today, state and municipal. NYPA has over $3 billion in annual revenues, 16 generating facilities with over 7,000 megawatts of generating capacity. Gil also oversees, and I didn't know it until I looked at your bio to prepare for this today. He oversees a 524-mile New York State main canal system, including the legendary Erie Canal. Gil is focused on transforming the 90-year-old public utility he heads, taking a frontline position in combating climate change. Gil is on the board of directors and co-chair of the board of directors of the Alliance to Save Energy. That's a board on which I serve as well, and he's an incredibly effective co-chair of that board. And so I'm sure you all welcome me, these incredible panelists. We are first going to hear from them for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to talk about several issues, and finally, as Bill said, open it up for questions from our virtual audience. And I'm going to start with Paula. Paula's going to give, both are going to give 5 minutes or so of opening remarks, and then we'll ask a few questions. So thank you all, and thank you, Paula and Gil. Paula?
Well, Melanie and Gil, two of my favorite people that I don't get a chance to see in person, as we discussed. And I will say, Melanie, that thank you for talking about how hard it is to technically think about moving the industry along, but all of us have been affected one way or another by COVID from a health perspective. So CPS Energy is in the fight. We really absolutely believe that we have to embrace change and make it happen. I think we thought, like everybody, that 2020 would be different, right? That we were poised to launch a new search for replacement energy, and of course we thought we'd have time to do that. And we were monitoring COVID as it was moving across the world. We were at the end of last year, we were watching it, and we have a pandemic preparedness program. We have a business continuity program, like all of our peers in public power take our service so seriously. And we were, using our face masks and elbow bumping and all this, using sanitizer all over the place, and still, this was much more overwhelming. Our organization is municipal. We have served this community for 160 years, and we've been owned by the city of San Antonio almost 78 years. So, for us, this is where we grew up. I was born in San Antonio. I've been a customer of this energy company for a lot longer than I've been an employee. And so it really has affected everything that we do. So I liken it to rebuilding the plane while we're flying it in a storm after a storm after a storm. But we're doing it. Once we stabilized our operations, took care of our people first philosophy is focusing on our customers, doing the standard things that people have done, suspending disconnects, and we've gone 6 months now without doing disconnects. We have created an outbound program where we're calling customers. We had to suspend, we have one of the largest energy efficiency and conservation programs. The Alliance gave us an award last year that we're extremely proud of, because we believe energy efficiency and conservation are at the core of getting to net zero carbon emissions and managing how people consume energy and are aware. But we had to suspend it because we couldn't even get to homes to do the work particularly on the inside, weatherization, even getting people to want to get distributed solar systems on their home. was difficult. And we have a program here where we do a rooftop rental program, and so no, you know, no upfront cost. We'll give you a credit, but again, you really just couldn't do that. We have restarted our energy efficiency and conservation program, and we are in the process of trying to do what we call this flex power bundle. And it ties back to a strategy that we created about 3 years ago. It's called the flexible path. Being in this business so long and being in the generation, transmission, distribution, and people business, we had a recipe of being able to build generation to fit a growing population. Texas has a growing population. San Antonio has had a growing population for some time. But in 2017, we did see the disruption coming, and we did see how fast solar in particular evolved into a very affordable commodity, very common global, global landscape. So we decided then that we needed to be flexible. We needed to embrace distributed energy. We needed to embrace new technologies. We needed to encourage this ecosystem. And so our philosophy is to think globally and act locally. We had done a 400 megawatt RFP globally, and that the successful company came from South Korea. OCI was that, and we were excited about that. We have about 7,000 megawatts like NYPA in total capacity, and we had 1,000 megawatts of wind that we had been putting in over the last couple of decades. We added solar. And now here we are, and we have a diverse portfolio, and we have the challenges that every energy company has in one way or another. We've got coal. We retired 2 coal units in 2018, but we have one of the youngest coal units in the nation, and it's only 10 years old currently. We have nuclear, we have wind and solar, as we talked about. We have gas, natural gas. We also have very old steam gas units, and it's time to replace. And we get that we need to focus on coal. We also get, though, that we have to make sure that we focus on the much older. I mean, they're about 50 years old, our old steam units. So we have a dilemma trying to figure out how to do replace half our capacity as fast as we can. We believe that to maintain customer affordability, which is huge in our community, we have a very high level of low-income customers. So we have to be really, really careful not to cause rate shock. We have to do that. We have to maintain reliability when a lot more people are at home, either looking for jobs or working from home. I mean, whatever it is, people notice a blink. And so we have to think about this transition. And what we did is we put an RFP out in early August, an RFI, excuse me, because we did an RFI because everybody's busy. So we didn't know who was going to respond. We put it out in 10 languages across the globe. We want a profile that meets about 900 megawatts of additional solar. We want some energy storage, not that much lithium ion, just because the way a utility uses a battery is very exhaustive. And then we want about 500 megawatts of what we call firming capacity to make sure that we fill in the gaps for the challenges of intermittency on solar. We were excited. We got, in 1 month, we got about 200 responses. About 10% of those came from countries all over the globe. And we do have people making proposals to us, and we're going to shape the actual RFP based upon the information that we're getting. So we're excited, and we're focused on it. But it's an uphill battle trying again to figure out how do we make our goals. The flexible path strategy will get us to 80% reduction in our emissions by 2040. And then our board endorsed the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan that puts us in alignment with the Paris Accord 2050 goals, net carbon reduction to zero by net 50. But we understand that the challenge is, there's this focus on can you get there faster? Can you get there faster? And so the only challenge is velocity for us, not that we don't have the commitment, it's the velocity of change. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Gil, the real challenges are, I'm a Star Trek fan. And so I was watching people talk on phones, a long time ago when you couldn't do it. And of course we can't beam each other up, but that phone thing was a big deal. And now we can. I got my iWatch on and we're all good. But all of the challenges that we want to solve in terms of changing to new technology, we have to keep feeding the research and development. We've got to keep feeding, you know, how can we use hydrogen better? How can we make it more affordable? How do we get these products in there? And then what new technologies can we encourage so that the price comes down and the efficiency goes up? But we can't snap our fingers and solve all those issues immediately. For us, it's one step at a time. It is a path. We are willing to be flexible, look at optionality, keep all our options open, and at the same time, you know, manage the expectations of those who want us to move faster. And so we consider it a partnership, and we love the fact that we're able to talk to many around the nation and to you today about what we're trying to accomplish.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Paula. And Gil, a few words from you?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Our Energy Policy. It's great to be with all of you, especially it's great for me to be with two of the most fearless and just an unbelievable leaders in our industry. The New York Power Authority is the largest state-owned electric utility in the United States. We produce about 25% of all electricity in New York State, 80% of that approximately from clean hydroelectric power. We also own about a third of our high voltage transmission system. So you can think of NYPA as the backbone of New York State's power system. And our primary customer really is the state. We do not have distribution like Paula, but we are part of the interconnected grid here in New York. With that said, we do have retail electric supply customers. So all of the subway tracks here in New York City, the airports owned by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, we supply the electricity delivered by the local utility Con Edison and all other government buildings in New York City. So City of New York City Housing Authority, Port Authority, all the state buildings in New York City are electric supply customers of NYPA. We also supply about 51 small municipal and rural cooperative systems scattered around our state. And also we supply very low cost hydropower to large commercial and industrial customers all across the state to induce economic development and job creation. Our low cost power program supports over 400,000 jobs here in our state. Our state passed legislation last year called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's one of the, if not the most aggressive legislation when it comes to battling climate change. It requires that we reduce, we are net zero by 2050, 70% renewables by 2030, 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035, 6 gigawatts of solar by 2025, and 3 gigawatts of storage by 2030. And most importantly, as Paula mentioned, a very aggressive goal of energy efficiency, 185 trillion BTUs and energy reduction in 2025. There is now what's called a Climate Action Council that was formed as part of that legislation, and we're in the process of operationalizing the goals and how to achieve the goals in that legislation. NYPA will play a big role as always here in our state. We have been tapped, for example, to really lead in the build out of the transmission system to enable to connect renewable sources to load centers and to interconnections with our neighboring states, including province of Quebec, for example. We're also very active in working with our customers in their decarbonization journey, doing solar, distributed solar, other type of distributed energy services, energy efficiency, demand response, and digital energy services. We have made a conscious decision to invest in digital technology. We've been doing it for the past 8 years, both in our utility operations and in the delivery of customer energy solutions. So let me stop there. I know we've got a lot of topics to cover today, and let me give it back to Melanie.
Great, thank you so much, Gil, and thank you, Paula. And just listening to both of you and looking at my own experience and the experience of most people in the country. And this isn't on questions that I had originally planned to ask, but do you all see any change because of the change in workspace and a lot of people working from home, different times of the day, on webinars and Zoom all the time like we are? Have you all started to see any difference in changes in load profiles and times of day, those kinds of things that might affect operations or suggest different operations because of COVID, and assuming there might be a permanent change in the workplace? I actually like working with my colleagues in person, but I think a lot of people have been surprised by how they can work at home. And I've been thinking about how that might affect electricity loads and demand, and was wondering if you'd seen any changes in that regard.
I'll jump in a bit. Actually, we haven't seen that much of a tremendous change. I mean, what's happened is that the demand that we were seeing from restaurants, even churches, school districts have been substituted with increased demand at homes. And so our residential activity has been up. Initially, our commercial and industrial was down double digits very significantly, and it pulled all of the load down in the transition. But we keep seeing the increased, demand on our residential side, and so it hasn't felt that different for us per se. And I also think the new normal, though, Melanie, to your point, the new normal is interesting though, because I do think people are a little bit more emotionally tired, and I think that it'll all level out, and people still have this normal work day approach for the most part. Maybe manufacturing will be the real challenge because of the ability to have multiple shifts, but we haven't seen a huge change in the demand. I don't know, Gil, if that's been different for you.
Yeah, similar. During the peak of as you know, we were the epicenter in the early part of the year. Statewide, there was probably a reduction of between 8 and 10% in energy use. More in the New York City area, probably closer to 15 to 20%, but it has come back since then. Statewide, we're probably down 3%. Maybe more here again in New York City, but New York has been reopening since June. Thank God our infection rate is still low, and because of that, we've been reopening across the various regions here in our state, and so it's starting to come back. Now, the big question is if there will be a deep recession, what is that going to mean? Are residential neighborhoods going to be more loaded than the commercial districts? So those are the kind of things that we need to keep our eye on.
Great. Thank you so much. And Paula, let me ask you a question. I know CPS has a STEP program, an initiative aimed to save 771 megawatts of electricity between 2009 and 2020, and that was viewed as a big success. Can you tell us a little bit about, I would assume there's a lot of demand response and efficiency, et cetera, in that, but can you tell us how you were able to meet and exceed the goals that were set by that program?
Well, to your point, we finished a year early, and we saved about $100 million in the process, and achieved more megawatts than we planned. Instead of the 771, we got over 800 megawatts of savings. And so it was done, the thing that we will say, even, as we're looking at our flexible path strategy, it was done through a portfolio. Like we had to create so many different options, and we had to think about different customers wanting different things. Weatherization probably has the least amount of overall efficiency for the amount that you have to invest and for the savings that you get. It's a high cost program. However, there are people who need it more than anything else you can do for them. And so we initially had weatherization come in from the federal program, and then we just bumped it up and waved and pushed it all the way into the utility. And so we just kept adding new programs in distributed generation, expanding to community solar, and then the roof rental program. And demand response is a big part of our program, and we continue to add more customers, school districts and universities, businesses. The more and more we can get out and talk to people again about controlling their thermostats and demand, we just kept trying to expand each of those components. And so we have multiple products. I will say, so we completed a year early. We're in now what we call our step bridge year. So we're trying to figure out, are there new things that we should be doing? The whole point is, the more you can introduce these products and make them mainstream and get the price to come down and the efficiency to go up, they become the regular things that people buy. So we're looking for new opportunities to add more solutions. When we did put out the RFI for the Flex Power Bundle, which was mostly on the generation side, that was the focus. We also added a component of energy efficiency and conservation for a global view. And so we're taking in input from local customers that are asking for different things that they're seeing and reading about. We're getting input globally from companies, all over. We're talking to, we created a network called the New Energy Economy, and there are partners in that space that are, that's all they do. And so they're going out and getting new ideas. And so we're going to put it all together. And our goal is to create another 10-year program to make it work. And the last thing I'll say about that, though, it's self-funded, meaning everybody in the community contributes a bit every single month on their bill. Sometimes it's been as low as below $1, but the average range is somewhere around $3.50 to $5. And customers we've surveyed, they don't want to pay much more than $5. But if they can do that and they know that overall the system benefits, then they've been good. So we're gonna try some new stuff, and we're gonna try to still make sure that it's really affordable. But we're open to a lot of ideas. Anybody can reach us now and kind of pitch whatever they're thinking of.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. I think it's terrific. I've actually learned a lot about it just listening to you talk about it here. Gil, I've long been worried about the impacts of climate change on the physical grid, not the opposite. And I worry about that too. How does the grid impact climate change? But the impacts of climate change on the grid. We've seen that like crazy in California, wildfires, okay, in particular, hurricanes, tornadoes, the increased heat in, droughts, et cetera. And when I was at DOE, we modeled the Gulf of Mexico, moderate sea level rise, 1/3 to a half of the substations, absent adaptation actions, crisis management actions, would go underwater with very moderate sea level rise. And I know that NYPA has a goal of ensuring that its long-term strategy addresses the impacts of climate change on the physical grid, and was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you all are doing in that regard. It's really adaptation strategies, and it's worrisome as we talk about electrifying everything, okay? Because the electric infrastructure is most exposed, not like a gas pipeline, but power lines. And so wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, New York got a couple of tastes of this with tropical storm or superstorm Irene and Lee, and then Sandy, superstorm Sandy. Irene and Lee impacted more upstate New York, so there were a lot of flooding in upstate New York. Whereas Sandy, as you know, more downstate New York City, Long Island. And since then, a couple of things have happened. The utilities have been investing in adaptation. So for example, undergrounding, different equipment, or selectively undergrounding, or lifting substations. so that they're not within the floodplain based on projections. There are also all the utilities, starting with Con Edison, which is the big utility here in downstate, have been studying the various models on how climate change may impact the physical infrastructure and planning their capital program based on that. NYPA, we do the same. We have power plants in New York City and Long Island. And so we're looking at what adaptation measures we need to do to protect those assets, both power plants and substations. So it is well underway here in New York. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, because we got hit by Irene and Lee and Sandy, that we're on that path, and we have great academic institutions here supporting the analysis, like Columbia and Cornell University, in really studying those type of models so that our regulators and our utilities are well informed.
Great, thank you so much, Gil. And I'm pretty focused on that issue. The weather and wildfires are reminding us. And I remember thinking when what was the big hurricane in Texas and Louisiana a few years ago, that watching people trying to evacuate in their cars, sitting in congested highways for hours and hours, what that would mean if those were electric cars. Okay, just some very, very practical implications of some of the things that we're talking about, safety and security implications that I think we need to do a lot of analysis of. And I was excited to see that NYPA is doing that. And Paula, you mentioned the lithium-ion batteries, and we've talked about this before. My think tank, Secretary Moniz and I and Joe Heiser, we did a technology analysis for the state of California. It assumed California's climate goals. And what did they need to meet those climate goals? In the course of that analysis, we looked at wind and solar generation in the state of California every day of the year in 2017. What we found was that there were 90 days with no wind. There were 10 days in a row with no wind. We wanted to see if that was an aberration, if California was unique. So we actually looked at Texas. Texas also had 90 days with no wind in that same year, different times of the year, but 90 days with no wind. And we all know that the duration for lithium-ion battery storage is basically 4 hours. Our conclusion is that you need a fuel to reliably run the grid, that batteries can provide ancillary services, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, for a reliable grid, you need a fuel. Right now, that fuel is natural gas. It could be hydrogen in the future. But right now, we don't see any substitute for a fuel. And was wondering if you all, Paula, if you had any thoughts about the role of natural gas for the foreseeable future, and what your experience has been. So, Paula, just some.
Absolutely. Well, again, we've been a gas company from the very beginning, much longer than we've been an electric company, and so natural gas has been a critical source of energy for us. Now, up until, I guess, the 10 years ago, though, we understood that there was so much pressure, every customer felt the volatility of that commodity, and the price spikes that would occur actually at one time made nuclear look like a pretty good, decent investment overall. So we've seen the hard part of it, but now that there's so much of it, now that we have huge reserves across the nation, the volatility is very muted and the emissions is much lower. And in Texas, we have a tremendous amount of supply overall from our oil refining processes. Then in some cases, natural gas is so cheap We've had odd instances because of the infrastructure needs to continue to be built out here. We've had odd instances where we actually get paid to take natural gas because it's more of the byproduct of the refining process. So all that said, it has helped bring prices down and keep them affordable in the state of Texas. The abundance is good. The stability is great. We believe that it's key to the future and transition and buying that additional time that we have to a need to make that transition. Things like hydrogen, things again like energy efficiency and conservation. If we hadn't put that program in, we would have built another plant in 2012. And so we think natural gas is a medium to beat. When in that flex power bundle that we talked about, there's two key points. The 500 megawatts, what we want to do is we want to stay open to all levels of technology. And we would love, of course, to have non-emitting sources to be in that 500 megawatt space. We're going to benchmark what we find against the performance of gas. We have to, because we have to, again, make sure that whatever we have can be fairly reliable and affordable, and it needs to complement what we're trying to do on the solar side. And so and then it's a way also to talk to our community. If we say we could get into a huge hydrogen project, in which case it's a federal program, it probably would have to be a complex partnership. It's still going to cost money to energy customers, and we have to worry about all that transition that happens, but we'll at least be able to compare what that option looks like in comparison to a new natural gas system. We could do peakers, we could do reciprocating engines, all kind of looking from the gas technology. When we were developing the flexible path, what we decided is, who knows, right? The transition of energy will, if we could all predict that and we'd be able to predict financial markets and the world would be different. But ultimately we said, we need to bring in and make smaller units. I mean, we used to build the biggest plants we could, but now we think we need smaller units so that the capital investment in the transition will be a whole lot more affordable again. So everything has to kind of be put into place. And the last thing I'll say, kind of back to your point, we did and have gotten criticism that the energy storage and lithium ion piece is so small, because most people believe that if you would put in lithium ion batteries with solar, that is the holy grail. But to your point, Melanie, it's not. A 4-hour duration is not enough when you get those weather patterns that you talked about. These plants run on the gas side, they run 24/7, 365. You take them down, and your ratio of performance goes down when you're doing outages, both planned and unplanned, but they run really well and they're not weather dependent. And so we have found that that's one of the biggest challenges, is the duration. And the other is the way we run systems. When you're a utility, all we care about is getting energy to the customers and get it without any breaks in the service. And so what we will do is we'll take a battery and we'll use the entire charge. And so we deep cycle that battery and we bring it back. And what we're finding is the manufacturers will say your battery will last 15 years. And so if you think about it, 15 years compared to a solar farm that's about a 25 to 30-year life, that means you're going to cycle that battery, or you're going to replace it once, right? One time over the life. So you got to double your investment. But what we find as a utility, we're lucky to get 5 to 7 years. That means you're going to cycle and replace. You're going to cycle the battery a lot, and you're going to replace a lot more. And so because of those performance issues, it's not quite the best solution in replacement to gas. And so we still believe gas helps us buy time, and gas helps us create a performance level that says, for new technologies, beat gas or get close to it, or create some other value proposition. Then you can again make sure your customers are getting value for all of the investments in research and things that you're doing. But right now, lithium ion batteries are not the complete, they're not the complete replacement. They do respond fast. That's what you need. When you have so much wind that can die down in a moment or not materialize when you expect it. We have 30,000 megawatts of wind on our grid in Texas approaching, and there's been days where we've only been able to count on 2,000 at peak. So you just got to keep all your juices going, and realize that every single technology has great benefit, but every single one has a gap that you have to manage. And that's why gas still is a great performer and can be very helpful in our transition to low to non-emitting goals.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Paula, Melanie.
Kind of the same question, and
Sorry, it's about time for us to start on attendee
Hello?
question. Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. So we have a number of questions that have come in from attendees. Melanie, did you
I
have
can't
some?
hear you. Yeah. Okay, great. Let me do one final question with or that same, basically the same question with Gil, and to demonstrate to you, Gil, what I did last night. Okay, I know that 37% of the power generation in New York State is gas. Okay, you all have a very a different situation because you've got a lot of hydro, which can be zero emissions firm power, but it's still 37% gas. So could you comment on what you see the role of gas and what its issues are in New York? Sam.
Well, it's one of the most challenging things we're going to have to deal with, right? Our legislation says that we need to have carbon-free electricity by 2040. And there was modeling done by our sister authority, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, with their consultant E3, that showed that we really need some fast ramping and flexible generation to handle the intermittency. So, there needs to be, for us to be able to meet our goal in 2040, there needs to be breakthrough technology in the area of long duration storage or, green hydrogen, ammonia, or synthetic gas. There needs to be, efficiency and demand response and more build out of the grid modernization in New York. It's really going to have to be all of the above. Because we need to maintain the reliability and resiliency requirements here in New York City. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on. NYPA will be the entity that will be the first to try things out. We will use our assets as test beds for those new technologies as they become available.
Great, thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Bill and the OEP folks to I understand there are questions from the audience.
Yes, thanks, Melanie. This is Alicia Moulton from OEP. We've had a number of attendee questions that have come in, and also just by way of announcement, if you have a question you'd like to ask, just submit it through the question panel. It should be on your GoToWebinar control panel. So first question, this is from Sid Abma. He asks, what is the role of carbon capture utilization at coal-fired power plants in reliability and decarbonization goals?
Well, this is a very interesting opportunity, but very tough. We have been looking at carbon capture very heavily for over a decade, and we ultimately believe right now it's still too expensive and not necessarily proven all the way through to be commercially available in our industry. But we do think that there is an opportunity, as Gil says. Is there a breakthrough on the horizon for carbon capture? I personally believe that the challenge that we have, if people look at the utilities as, not wanting to convert and not wanting to get out of coal units, we are not emotionally connected to anything, including our coal units. What we're connected to is to people. And so we want the technology to work for us, and we want it to develop. But we can actually probably transition from coal units to make it work. But there are a lot of other fossil production cycles across other industries that have to be addressed as well. And so when you look at what's going to happen in the global economy to keep it from failing or having the type of pressure that we're seeing now kind of blown up, so to speak, because if we don't find and refine our industrial processes across many industries and think about technology like carbon capture, then we're gonna have other difficulties in our food industry, our manufacturing, all of those high production things that we're used to, the benefits of. So that's my thoughts. And I don't know, Gil, if you have any.
No, the only thing I have to add is we need to continue to invest in R&D as a nation, and look at all these technologies, because we will need all of them to meet our aggressive climate goals.
Alicia, if I could say something on that too. I mentioned the study we did in California for both the electricity sector and the industrial sector. Carbon capture was by far the largest emissions reduction potential by 2030. And yes, it's expensive, but right now there is a significant tax credit, the 45Q tax credit, up to $50 a ton for carbon capture and sequestration. And in California, they have a low carbon fuel standard that adds an additional credit for certain parts, for certain emitters in the industrial sector for carbon capture and sequestration. So we view it as an important option and believe that it will be increasingly important in the future. The International Energy Agency just put out a study this week of the need for CCUS globally. So if anyone's interested. So.
Great,
Alicia?
thank you all for those thoughts. Thank you. Next, we had a few questions that came in about nuclear power, and for them, we'll read this one from Herschel Spector. He asks, it would take about until 2040 for New York's 9,000 megawatt offshore wind farm to cumulatively reduce GHG releases equal to the CO2 emissions from the Indian Point gas replacement plants. Is a 2040 break-even date acceptable from an environmental point of view?
As I've said, that yes, the Indian Point is going to be retiring, and we need to find a way to offset that increase. We have aggressive goals in offshore wind. There's going to be, another solicitation was just announced this summer by our sister agency, NYSERDA. We've got that 6 gigawatt solar goal and 3,000 gigawatt of storage goals. It's going to take all of that to make it. As I've mentioned before, there also needs to be breakthrough technologies to meet the 2040 goal. We do not have all the necessary technologies to meet that goal. I mentioned green hydrogen and ammonia, synthetic gas, long duration storage, build out of the T&D system, modernizing the T&D system. New York City in particular, it doesn't have enough transmission, interconnected transmission that goes into New York City. New York City, there is a requirement that at least 80% of the projected demand electricity must be produced within the 5 boroughs of New York City to maintain the reliability and resiliency. That's why there are power plants here. So it's a huge challenge, but this is New York, and we are used to big challenges here.
All right, any other responses before we move on?
I'll leave it to Gil about being the expert of the circumstance and landscape of New York. But I will say we have some units in South Texas that are very well run. We have a project that there's a partnership between 3 different utilities. We own about 40% of the nuclear system. We think those units are so well run that they could potentially go 60 to 80 years. And but it'll, time will tell. I will say here's another challenge with renewables. Renewables and their intermittency and the way that they die down because the weather's bad, you don't have it at night, you don't have storage. It makes it harder for the rest of your plants on the system. We don't modulate nuclear though, because you just have to make that at your foundation of what you do. But it's once you get it up and you figure out your issues in terms of spent fuel, it's very effective in terms of a climate solution. We don't think, though, that new nuclear is, on the horizon. There could be small box solutions that are very helpful in the long run. To Gil's point, you got to leave all those options on the table and assume that those are things that we can do to augment what we have, but keeping the plants running effectively, efficiently on the grid now is really helpful. I believe that if you said, I want all the fossil off and I want nuclear off, you could not meet the energy requirements with the current technology that we have. So everything's about velocity, timing, management, and optimization, and making that journey thoughtfully, adjusting all the time. So,
if I could say on that, Paula, I looked at, was giving a speech in New England. You raised an issue that reminded me of this, and I did a reference frame, not actual reality, but a reference frame. And New England's very space constrained. And I looked at what you would need if you got rid of all the nuclear and gas generation in New England. And capacity factors and replaced it with wind and solar, capacity factors, et cetera, for wind and solar. You needed about 250 square miles in a very space constrained area for wind, onshore wind generation, offshore wind generation. You needed 2,183 offshore wind turbines. Okay, and so that's to give you, so it's not reality, but to give you some kind of idea and context of what we're talking about in terms of replacement needs if you get rid of your nuclear and your natural gas generation. It's significant. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Alicia, other questions?
Yep. We have quite a few. We'll see how fast we can get through them. We had a few questions come in about hydrogen. And Melanie, I know that you mentioned this a little bit earlier on. So Nicholas Cornaros and Monterey Gardner both asked, what role do you see for hydrogen in deep decarbonization, given a few different factors, one being California's zero emission car announcement, recent reliability issues in California thanks to battery plus solar, as well as other factors, and also hydrogen's inclusion in the Biden climate plan?
So let me try and answer it. NYPA is one of the founding sponsors of an initiative by the Electric Power Research Institute and the Gas Technology Institute called the Low Carbon Resources Initiative. And that's precisely the moonshot. The moonshot is, can we develop hydrogen, ammonia, synthetic gas cost effectively to start replacing natural gas, not just in the power sector, but in the industrial sector. So we need to really make those investments in R&D. The federal government needs to step up also, colleges and universities and research centers. But that's going to be the goal, because we just do not have enough, at least for the moment, technologies to, in our case, in New York, to meet our goals while also meeting our reliability and resiliency requirements.
Great. All right, the next question, this is from Jason Diedrich. He asks, what is the potential of community scale energy management and demand response to increase reliability of the grid?
Well, I'll jump in a little bit. I mean, we do over 200 megawatts of optimized demand response, and we've had a program going on for a long time. And it's critical. I mean, the way that we work in concert with our customers, when we notify them and ask them to opt into the program, it works really well. And I think, increasing the systems and the control systems around the program can even optimize that better. But it is a voluntary program. You have to do a lot of work to get people to want to do that. And I think it's, we've grown that program maybe slower than we had wanted to. And so there's an opportunity, but it takes a lot of coordination and understanding to make that grow. And so you don't snap your fingers. It's a program, and you reinvest and re-educate all the time, and you put more effort into it. But it's much easier to do some other types of technology in some ways.
And if you look at California, I mean, it showed that demand response was really critical. NYPA's former chief commercial officer and executive vice president is now the senior vice president of customer service, customer operations in Southern California Edison, Jill Anderson, and she told me that demand response was just crucial in holding up the grid in California. And it will be crucial, I think, going forward. I like to call it demand flexibility.
I like that. I'll steal that.
Okay, great. Did you have a thought, Melanie?
I think that, and I was going to echo what Gil said, that demand response, even though they had rolling blackouts in California because of the wildfires, they were able to reduce the number of blackouts and duration of the blackouts because of demand response. And I think it's going to be even more critical going forward. It's one of the ways that we are going to address the impacts of climate change on the grid and reduce emissions. So I think it's very valuable for going forward. I would say that you also asked about the question, I think said was community generation, et cetera, as well, which I suspect that provides reliability services if you can island community generation and response, but I do worry a lot about cybersecurity issues and with the community solar, et cetera. I think we need to be very, very careful in that regard. All of our energy security used to be about oil. In my view, it's now all about electricity, because all of our critical infrastructures rely on electricity to operate. And so we need to be very, very careful about unhardened connections to our grid. So.
Great, thank you. We have time for just one more question here. So this question is from Mark Gabriel. He asks, how are you balancing the move to new technologies with the embedded costs of traditional generation, distribution, and transmission? What are the rate impacts?
I mean, I'll try to make a speed round response that we actually believe that the benefit that we have as an existing utility is that we can blend our tried and true aspects of our business with new. And to Gil's point, we do want to be a place where we can pilot more technologies and see how they work and optimize them while we're keeping everything else going. We do have to continue to put investments in the transmission system. We have to really realize that it was built for one-way push instead of two-way push and pull of energy. So it does require that. I will say CPS Energy hasn't had a rate increase in 6 years. We've been able to optimize our operations through the use of technology, both close to the customer and in the back office. So there is this benefit when you put in these better systems, you can operate better, and you just have to blend it all and do it smoothly and be careful all the way through. So as far as if you were the speed of it, if you tried to do a wholesale replacement and you try to do it overnight, it would be shocking for the community. And that's why you need your utilities and your energy experts to think about that transition. 10 years is a long time to make a transition, 30 is even better, but that's what we do all the time.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit, to me, as we go through this transition, system efficiency and capacity utilization is very important. So we always think about what are the technologies that we apply both on the generation, transmission, distribution system and grid edge and behind the customer that increases the capacity utilization of the power system end to end. In New York State, the average load factor or system efficiency of the power grid is about 54%, right? Because we built this capacity to meet the 100 days of the hottest days in July and August. But if we can increase the system efficiency of the power system by application of technologies across the board, that should mitigate the, in addition to what Paul is saying, where you feather in the investments that you make, but if you feather it in and you increase the system efficiency and the capacity utilization of the grid, that should moderate rate impact.
Sorry to jump in. This has been such an enlightening, insightful conversation. I feel like we could go on for another hour, but we do promise people will sign off. But so grateful to Paula, Gil, and to Melanie. I mean, just a really fascinating and insightful conversation about so many of these issues that are critical going forward and how they all relate to each other. I would encourage everyone attending to share your thoughts on the continuation of this discussion we're going to have online starting next week. So please go to the OEP website and participate. I want to thank our supporters and partners once again. I want to thank all of you all for taking the time to join us. Wish you all a good week. Melanie, would you like to add some final words?
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing is that I think that we need to figure out a way to honor the utility workers who've been out there on the front lines since the beginning of this crisis. They didn't get to take time off and are often exposed. And so I just want to put in a word for the utility workers that have been keeping our lights on, our homes heated and et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't want to leave without saying that. I think it's really important. So
I think it's a phenomenal point. And, you know, I think obviously all the frontline workers who've been doing their part during this period, but I think we don't always include the utility personnel in this, and they deserve our tremendous thanks for all the hard work and risk they've been taking to make us all safe. So once again, to all of you, thank you. Please join us online next week and have a good, safe week going forward. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.